So whatever approach would be in this case, that we will start with a simpler structure, the simplest possible structure, and we will study all of its dynamics. We will study its response against simple kind of dynamic loadings, and then complex, and then finally the totally random vibrations. And once we understand all the dynamic loads on this one simple structure, then we can make it more complex. Then we go to multiple degree of freedom system, then further complex continuous structures, which someone mentioned, that the structures which will have a distributed mass and distributed stiffness, not lumped mass and lumped stiffness. So and then at the end maybe we can have a chapter about vibration control. So let's have a quick review in 5 minutes what we studied last time. That we assume that we have a simple structure like this, and then we also have for example some real structures which can actually be modeled with this. I mean, we assume that the mass of this whole structure is just lumped at one point, at this specific point here. So there are two massless columns, and these columns have only lateral stiffness. So they will provide resistance only when there is a force in this direction. They are axially rigid. That beam which is resting on top of these two columns is also axially rigid. So basically the displacement at this particular end is same as the displacement at this particular end in horizontal direction, and same as in the middle. So anywhere in that beam, since it is rigid, so the displacement is same in all along that axis. So which means that this is a kind of a system which can be described only by this one function u of t. If you give me this u of t, I can imagine how will it behave or how will it actually vibrate. Only one number is required, basically the one function is required. But as we move further, we came to know that there is some additional thing required in that, and that additional thing is an energy dissipating mechanism which will actually bring it back to rest position. So a real structure which will be like this, a simple structure will have air resistance, which will have friction, will have a lot of those phenomena which should be ideally modeled in order to make its response realistic. Currently this response is not realistic. Mathematically there is no factor in that model which will bring that displacement into rest position after a few cycles, but actually we know that it will come to the rest position. So what we did was that we introduced a hypothetical damper in that system in order to make it more realistic. So now this is that damper, this one. It's a dashpot, just like a shock absorber in your vehicles, that it absorbs energy when there is a relative motion between two of these parts of that piston. So one part here is connected to the actual mass, which will be basically moving in this horizontal direction, the only direction possible for this mass to move, and the other part is connected to the fixed support. So which means whenever the mass will move, it will dissipate some energy because of that damper. Okay. Whenever the mass will move, there will be inertial forces in the mass. Whenever the mass will move, there will be some elastic restoring forces provided by the lateral stiffness of these columns. Okay. So now we have three players in that equation. One is the inertial force produced due to the presence of mass. The second is the damping force available or present because of that damper, and third is the elastic force which is produced by the columns and the lateral stiffness of that column. Okay. So whenever there is an applied force and that is dynamic in nature, f of t, now I will always write a dynamic function as a function of time, so there will be this notation. Force is a function of time. Now whenever there is a dynamic force, these three forces will resist that dynamic force. The elastic force provided by the lateral stiffness of columns, the damping force provided by the inertial force provided by the inertia of that mass, and the damping force provided by this hypothetical damper which we have added. So 3 forces from structure side and 1 force which is applied force. In static case we had only one force, Ku, the elastic force from columns. So if I apply this force statically, so it is not a function of time, in that case there will be no inertial force and no damping force. There will be only Ku, so we will have F is equal to Ku. But when this F is a function of time, then there will be two additional forces, which is damping and inertial force. So let's continue with developing a mathematical model for this simple structure. Let's see what equation governs the oscillations or movement or vibration, whatever you can call it. Let's see what equation governs this system. We know already that a structure which is applied with a static force is governed by one matrix equation, and that is F is equal to Ku. Now let's see what equation governs this simple system. We are about to derive its equation of motion, an equation which can be solved to calculate how this simple system will move or will oscillate. So this is a very simple system. The equation will also be simple, but for most of the practical dynamic analysis problems, the formulation of this equation of motion is sometimes the most difficult task of this whole thing. But this is a very simple system. The equation will also be simple. Generally, to formulate equation of motions, there are two approaches. The first one is called the equilibrium approach, in which what you do is that you cut different sections of your structure and then you draw the free body diagrams, apply equilibrium equations, and then come up with the governing equation of motion for your structure. The second approach is called the energy approach, using the principle of virtual work or sometimes using Hamilton's principle. So we will be using only the first approach here for simple structure, which is the direct dynamic equilibrium. These are a system of three forces, F1 and then F2 and then F3 here, and all these three forces are, let's say, dynamic in nature, so they are all function of time, F1, F2 and F3. If all of their sum at each time instant is 0, we call it the static equilibrium. Why static? Because since their sum is 0, the object on which it is applying simultaneously, it is not going to move or oscillate or vibrate. But if their sum is not 0, let's say that we have three forces F1, F2 and F3, and their sum is not 0, we know already that this object which is having these forces will accelerate, and that acceleration will be A, and that acceleration will also be a function of time. By the way, in this lectures I am using a bold symbol for vectors, and a symbol without bold will be representing a scalar quantity. So F1, F2 and F3 are vectors. This A of t will be the resulting acceleration because of not balancing these forces, and if that A of t is multiplied with the mass of the system, that will become an inertial force which that object is going to experience. This is Newton's second law, we already know that. But what D'Alembert did is that we assume that m times a force is also an applied force with opposite sign, and then the sum of all four forces can be equal to 0. This is called dynamic equilibrium. So F1, F2, F3 plus this inertial force Fi, which is equal to minus m times acceleration vector, is now a null vector. Obviously we cannot call it 0 because it is sum of vectors, so it should be a null vector. So this is called D'Alembert's principle, or the principle of dynamic equilibrium. So we can use this principle to derive the equation of motion for our simple structure. So We know already that, for example, F1 plus F2 plus F3 is equal to m times a, which can also be written as the second derivative of the displacement vector r with respect to time. So r is the displacement vector, and the second derivative of displacement vector with respect to time will be the acceleration vector. So Fi is equal to minus m times a. D'Alembert concept states that the mass develops an inertial force in proportional to its acceleration and opposing it. So if you assume that the inertial force opposes the mass movement, in that case we can write that sum of all four forces equal to a null vector. We can apply this dynamic equilibrium principle to our simple structure to come up with this governing equation of motion. So we will be using this D'Alembert principle, this one, last one, to our simple structure. So let's draw a free body diagram of our simple structure where M is here, this is all M, K is here, the stiffness provided by the columns, the lateral stiffness, and C is the property of the damper. We assume that the damper is a viscous damper, which means that the force it develops, the damping force, is proportional to the velocity of the movement or the velocity of that mass. So we can say that Fd, the damping force, is proportional to velocity, and if we equate that, Fd will be equal to the constant of proportionality C and then multiply by the velocity. That constant of proportionality is also known as the damping constant, and that damping constant is, the value of that constant is set such that the Fd will actually correspond to the energy dissipating force in your system. Okay, so please keep that in mind, that this Fd represents air resistance, friction, all those forces which will oppose the applied force with each cycle of oscillation, and ultimately will bring that object to rest. Okay, so that damping force is a function of velocity of that structure. With high velocity that mass is moving, the more force your damper is going to produce, and that C constant is set such that the overall damping force actually represents those energy dissipating phenomena. So C is an input from structure side, okay, just like K is the input from structure side, mass is the input from structure side. Now that system is applied with a force, dynamic force P of T, obviously P is a vector, so I represent it with a bold P, and let's cut a section here for our simple structure. Now if I represent Fs with the static force in the columns, the resistance provided by columns against this P of T, that half of that Fs is going to be resisted by one column and the other half is going to be provided by the second column. So Fs over 2 will be here, and obviously if the applied force is in the rightward direction, the restoring force or the elastic restoring force provided by columns will be in the leftward direction. So Fs over 2 will be here and Fs over 2 will be on the other side of the column. And obviously if P is a function of time, then Fs is also a function of time. So we have Fs function of time over 2 and here also over 2. Similarly, at the point where the damper is connected to the mass, we have a damping force, let's call it Fd, and also it is again a function of time. Fd is a damping force, and that Fd should also be in the opposite direction compared to the applied force, because it is going to resist that applied force. And there is another force Fi, which is the inertial force, and that will be inside that mass, and that will also be in the leftward direction. So anyone having doubts in this notation? U of t vector will be representing the displacement of that mass, the only possible displacement, the only degree of freedom, and this will be a vector, by the way, because it will have a particular direction, the same direction as the P force. Let's define velocity of that mass as the first derivative of that u. So du by dt will be the first derivative, which is velocity, and d2u over dt square will be the second derivative, which is acceleration. I is the unit vector in the direction under consideration. So all of these quantities, all of these forces, displacements, velocity, acceleration, all will have the direction of I. Okay, so I is a unit vector which is representing the direction of all of these quantities, the only direction which is being considered here. Okay, so there are four dynamic forces in this system. One is the applied force, this one P of T, and the other three are the resisting forces offered by our structure. If the applied force was static, I am repeating again and again, then there will be no Fi, there will be no Fd. The only force would have been was Fs. The inertial force, as we have seen in D'Alembert principle, Fi will be minus m times d2u of t by dt square, the acceleration vector. Rightward forces can be taken as positive, just like the applied dynamic force, and the leftward forces can be negative. So Fi is negative. Similarly, Fs will be Ku. This is called the elastic restoring force, Fs. This is the real stiffness or the real force offered by the lateral stiffness of the columns. And then we also have the Fd, which is minus c times velocity, and velocity is the first derivative of displacement with respect to time. So we can call it as cu dot, where u dot, function of time, is basically the first derivative of time. Similarly, u double dot will be second derivative of u with respect to t, so it will be acceleration. So d2u over dt square. So this will be the notation which I will be using for simplicity. U dot means velocity and u double dot means acceleration. These derivatives with respect to time. So now we have all these four forces, and then we can put their sum equal to 0 using D'Alembert's principle. So when we put their sum equal to 0, we can get this equation. So now we have here F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus applied force equal to null vector. So in our case it will be mass times acceleration Fi, c times velocity Fd, and Ku, which will be elastic restoring force, equal to the applied force. So we know already that all of these quantities u of t, u dot, u double dot, p of t, all of four forces have the same direction, which is I direction, the horizontal direction. So we can drop that direction and we can convert that equation into a scalar form, and that scalar form of equation will be simply this one, the one in the box. Here you have mass time acceleration plus c times velocity plus k times u of t will be equal to p of t. So now this is a scalar equation, no bold forces, no bold symbols, and this scalar is based on the assumption that all of the four forces will have same direction. Okay, and that is only horizontal direction which is being considered in this case. So now this equation in box is our mathematical model for this simple system. If we have to calculate how much that system is going to move against any applied force P of t, we have to solve this equation. Now this is a second order ordinary differential equation. If this P of t is 0, then it becomes a homogeneous second order equation. But if we have some applied force, in that case it is a non-homogeneous equation. And then we know already some of the classical methods of solution of this equation. And some of you might have already guessed that the solution of this equation, the classical solution, depends on what function we have on the right hand side. For example, if we have a sinusoidal function or any trigonometric function or logarithmic function, the solutions will be different. Okay, but the basic idea will be same, that the solution will have two components. One will be called the particular solution, the other will be called homogeneous solution, and that particular solution will depend on what function we have on the right hand side. But the baseline is that we have to solve this equation for any given p of t, and then we can calculate u of t. So our basic unknown is what? U of t, the displacement of the system as a function of time. This is our primary, you can say, output required from this system, the basic unknown. Equation is clear now that on one side we have already given with the mass of the system structure, we are given with the applied force, we are given with the stiffness of the structure, because stiffness is a function of geometry of the structure and the material properties. So K is already known if a structure is given. C is also a structural property. You know, steel structures will have a lower damping and concrete structures will have a higher damping. So we already know some idea about C, what C values should be used for a given structure. So M, K and C are the inputs from structure side, P of T is the input from loading side, and we are required to calculate U of T, how the structure is going to vibrate or oscillate, how much, and then also the derivatives of U of T, maybe velocity and acceleration. But once we get U of T, we can always convert it into U dot and U double dot. So basically the main output required is U of T. This was a single degree of freedom system. Let's imagine what a multiple degree of freedom system would have looked like. Now, for example, if we have a 3-story building, what we could have done is that we just drop some of the assumptions. Like for example, the columns, we assumed that they were rigid in axial direction, so there was no up down movement. So one way of adding additional degrees of freedom in our simple structure was that we add, let's say, the vertical degree of freedom or the rotational degrees of freedom. But a very simple way of doing it is that we just keep all that assumptions intact, and then we increase the number of lumped masses, and that will add to the additional degrees of freedom in our structure. So if we have a 3-story building, for example, we have a 2D frame, so we can assume that there are 3 masses, M1 here, M1, then M2, and then M3. So now the mass is lumped at not at one position but at 3 different positions, and all of those assumptions are still there. These columns are rigid in vertical direction, the beams cannot rotate, so there are no rotational degrees of freedom. So the only degree of freedom allowed at each mass will be just one horizontal degree of freedom. So you will have U1, U2 and U3. So now this is a 3-degree of freedom system with 3 lumped masses, and it can represent roughly a 3-story building or a 2D frame of a 3-story building. Now we need simultaneously 3 functions, U1, U2, U3, to describe the deflected shape of that building. So just compare it with single degree of freedom system where you only needed one U of T. Now you need 3 U of T. Just imagine that there are 3 forces applied to that system, and P1, P2, P3, and each of the story is shaking with its own U1, U2, U3. Since P of T is dynamic, so U1, U2, U3 are also dynamic functions of time. So imagine that 3 floors are fluctuating in different directions. It can be that M1 and M3 are going in one direction and M2 is going in the opposite direction at a particular instant, and in the next instant they change the directions. So these three can be independently vibrating by three forces. So what you are seeing here is just a screenshot. While all M1, M2, M3 were moving in one direction. Okay, but in next instant there will be a different screenshot. In next instant another screenshot. So it means that at a particular instant you need three numbers to completely describe its motion. That's why it is a 3 degree of freedom system. Three numbers at the same time. Since we already developed the mathematical model for applied loading, let's develop the same mathematical model if the loading is not applied but the ground is shaken at the base. So let's develop the same equation, equilibrium equation, dynamic equilibrium equation, for the case of ground shaking. So let's say that now we have a UG vector applied here. So UG is a vector function of time which is the displacement of ground. So now the original position was, let's say, this of the column. UG will be a random shaking. So at a particular time instant, let's say this is the position of the column. What will be the position at top? Okay, base will be displaced by UG of t. If the base is displaced by UG here, what will be the condition at top? It will have a displacement more than UG because UG will be the displacement which will be rigid body movement. The whole structure is going to go UG. But on top of that, the structure columns will have some additional deformation, the structural deformation, and that will be this much. Okay, this much. So let's define the displacement, the total displacement at top of the structure as ut function of time, ut function of time, and that will be ug plus u function of time. Now ug is the ground displacement and u is the structural displacement. U is coming from how much the column deflect because of that shaking, and a person standing on top roof will experience a total deflection of this much. Okay, he will experience both. He will have UG plus UT, and since all of these three displacements are fluctuating, so they will have positive, negative signs. Okay, so we just write it as this is equal to this plus this, but you know already that u can be positive and negative at some instants. Obviously when u is going towards right hand side we can call it positive, when it is coming backward we call it negative. So all three displacements will have positive, negative signs, but we know that at any time instant we can just write total u is equal to ug plus ut, ug plus u. So now we have only three forces, no applied force. If we cut a section here at this location, just like last time, we will have Fs. Okay, half will be here, half will be here, but their total will be Fs, Fd and Fi. So the equation of dynamic equilibrium just tells us that simply Fi plus Fs plus Fd should be null vector, or if I write in scalar form, Fi plus Fs plus Fd should be 0. Okay, because no applied force at ground, we don't have any force. If we would have an applied force, we would have included it somewhere, but we don't have any force. So the equation is simple, only three forces, the sum should be 0, that's all. Okay, so let's calculate these three forces. Yes, please. Due to this ground displacement, the structure should have moved towards left. It depends on, by the way, a lot of things. One of the thing is the stiffness of the structure. Imagine that structure is very rigid. It will move with the ground, just like a low-rise building, the example of a low-rise building. Imagine a structure is a high-rise building, a very flexible building. In that case, okay, when the ground will move on one side, the structure is going to go on the other side. We will cover that, by the way. That is called the phase difference between applied force and the response. Currently, we are assuming that that phase difference is not there. But even if it is there, it is not going to affect our calculations, because we are going to develop a general equation that will cover everything. Just like this, ut is equal to ug plus u equation is a general equation. This one is a general equation. No matter u is positive or negative, this equation is going to hold, because we just write it in a manner that it is true always. Now, elastic force will be Fs is equal to Ku, and the U which we will be using in here will be U total or what? Because we have U total which is on the top, and we have only U which is the actual structural deflection. Obviously, yes, the elastic restoring force will be produced only because of the structural deflection. If both ends of a structure, base and top, are moving together, there will be no Fs. The Fs will be only when there is a relative deflection. So that's why the relative deflection is used here. U of t is a relative deflection. Same is the case with damping force. The first derivative of u, which is velocity, that u should not be u total. That u should be the actual structural deflection. Because obviously if both top and bottom are moving together, then there is no damping force developed in the damper. That damping force will only be developed when there is a relative deflection, and that relative deflection is the structural deflection U. But what about inertial force? Yes, because imagine a person or a mass which is at top of a structure, it is going to develop inertial force, and that inertial force is function of the acceleration of that mass, only acceleration of that mass. So the structure or the mass basically doesn't need to know where that movement is coming from, whether the base is moving with me or not. Whatever the total u at top of the structure, that u should be double derivative should be converted to acceleration, and that u should be multiplied with mass to get the inertial force. So when you calculate inertial force here, mass multiplied by the acceleration should be total acceleration based on total displacement, and not only the structural displacement. So now when you know already that you have to use ut here to calculate inertial force, and we know already that ut is basically ug plus u. We know that already. Clear? So we put here ug plus u, and obviously the minus sign shows that if ug is on right hand side, the forces will be on left hand side, but ultimately their sum should be 0. So all of these three forces have same direction, so all three will be negative, so their sum should be 0. So let's put their sum equal to 0, because now we have inertial force which is basically now two terms, not one term, because ut was sum of these two terms. Clear? So now the sum of these three forces will again yield 4 terms. Here you can see that this is the damping force, this is the elastic restoring force, and here should be the inertial force. The inertial force was again having two values, one with ug and one is only u. So let's keep that u term here and move that ug term on the other side of the equation. Otherwise we had 0 or null vector on the other side. The original equation was fi plus fd plus fs equal to null vector. But this fi again have two terms. So one we keep here, this one, and the other one we shifted on the right hand side. Now compare it with the original equation and that becomes clear mathematically that left hand side exactly is the same as the equation of motion for forced vibration. The only difference is that on the right hand side instead of having p of t, now you have this term, and this term is what? Minus m times, what is this whole thing? Ground acceleration. We started with a ground displacement problem and we have a term which is having ground acceleration, double derivative of ground displacement. Okay. So it means that if we know that how much acceleration our ground is going to have, we can multiply it with mass of the structure to convert it into an equivalent force, because now the left hand side of the equation is same. P of t can be simply replaced by this term, or this term can be replaced by P of t, and these two cases are exactly same now. Okay. So the bottom case with P of t was a case with fixed support with an applied force equal to P of t. The top case is now a case with a moving support with no applied force. So we have proved mathematically that both of these cases will yield mathematically the same u if we replace P of t with this quantity minus m times the ground acceleration. So these two cases are identical. On left hand side we have the equation we just derived in case of a ground movement case. On right hand side we have an equation which is for applied loading. So if we just replace this P of t with this quantity, the equations are same. So the response created by a ground acceleration u, the response u will be same as if the base was fixed and the structure was applied with a force equal to minus m times ug dot dot minus m times the ground acceleration. Okay. So we can simply convert an earthquake into a force. Okay. So we can convert a case of ground acceleration into a case of applied force, because mathematically they are giving you the same u, and u is what is ultimately required. Okay. Relative displacement between base and top. All shear forces, bending moments, rotations, strains, they will be produced by u of t, the structural deflection. Okay. If the structure is moving like a rigid body, there are no shear forces, no bending moments, nothing. If we start with ground displacement, we end up with calculating a force which is a function of ground acceleration. Nowadays we have a very sophisticated equipment like this. So they will give us, during an earthquake, they will give us ug dot dot as a function of time, this whole graph as a function of time. And what we can do is we can simply multiply this ug dot dot with minus m to get a force, a p of t, which will produce the same displacement as the ground acceleration. Okay. So the shape of that ug dot dot will be same as this p of t, because the constant multiplier is minus m is a constant quantity. So the structure can be just applied with this p of t using the same equation or the same solution methods which we have calculated or solved or derived for p of t case. We can also use them for ground acceleration case. All we need to do is just replace that p of t with this minus m ug dot dot. And even we can have accelerographs where we can have the real time acceleration versus time graph on computer screens using the software which come with it. Another picture, and I may not be explaining its working principle, but nowadays we have accelerometers which can record the ground shaking in 3 perpendicular axes or 3 perpendicular directions, which are x, y, and z. The actual ground shaking is a 3D motion, but we don't record that 3D motion. We record its 3 components at each instant. And by the way, if those 3 components are given to us, we can again combine them to create that 3D movement. Okay. So the actual 3D motion will be recorded in x direction separately, in y direction separately, and z direction separately. So if you have an earthquake of 60 seconds, you will have 3 graphs: acceleration in x second, 60 second, acceleration in y direction, 60 second, and z direction, which means vertical up down, 60 second. The ground acceleration recordings, if you check the records from past earthquakes, you can see that they are of different kinds. Some are pulse like ground motions like this or this one, which have one peak, a very high peak, and then all other peaks are far lower than that one peak. They are called pulse like ground motions. Mostly the areas which are close to the epicenter or close to the faults which cause that ground motion, those areas will experience these kind of ground shakings. Some are like this, El Centro 1940, which have a lot of peaks of almost similar amplitude for a long time, maybe 50, 60 seconds, 40 seconds. Some will be like this, that will be very short duration, maybe 10 seconds, with some peaks and then zero. Some can be like this one, Chile 1985. A lot of big peaks for a long time, maybe 80, 90 seconds, very destructive. I mean, you will have a lot of big peaks of shaking. In short, we can just simply multiply the acceleration with mass to convert it into force. And if the acceleration is given, we can simply integrate it to calculate velocity, centimeter per second, and we can integrate it once more to get displacement. So now our task for rest of the course, or at least for next 3-4 weeks, is to solve that equation for a given P of t. If the P of t is an earthquake, how we can solve that single degree of freedom system? If that P of t is a gentle push and a gentle pull, sinusoidal, what will be the solution? If it is periodic, what is the solution? So we will have different topics in coming weeks for the solution of this equation. Then we jump to multiple degree of freedom system, and then some practical applications of this theory which we have studied. Just by the study of single degree of freedom system, you can have a lot of valuable concepts which will be used right up to the end, right up to the seismic design concept or wind design concept, just from that single degree of freedom system. So that's why that basic discussion is an integral part of all structural dynamics courses, because we will understand the concept of resonance from that single degree, the concept of natural frequency and its role in the dynamic response, and a lot of, a whole list of concepts which we will be studying here. Now, the equation which we want to solve is an ordinary differential equation, and we already have handled such equations in our ordinary differential equation courses, basic mathematics. Most of you have already had those courses. So the very first solution method is a classical solution method. And the classical solution method is only possible for some simple kind of dynamic loadings. So it is possible for free vibration case, which means when right hand side is 0. And by the way, when right hand side of the equation is 0, will we have any vibrations? When if we have, for example, mu dot dot function of time plus cu dot function of time plus ku function of time is equal to 0, will we still have some u of t, or u of t will be 0? Obviously u of t equal to 0 is one solution of this equation. If you put u of t equal to 0 in above equation, it will satisfy, but there will be some non-zero solutions also. For example, we have just seen one, for example, the ground displacement. Just imagine that you have a single degree of freedom system and you give an initial displacement u naught. You just pull it and release it. It will start oscillating without any force. So it means that whenever the right hand side equal to 0, but there are some initial conditions, there will be still some non-zero solution. U of t can be some non-zero. So the very first thing which we will be studying is a free vibration case where we will solve that equation for right hand side equal to 0, and we will still come up with some non-zero solution, and that non-zero solution will be a function of initial displacement and initial velocity. Yes, if that initial displacement and velocity is again 0, then the only solution possible is u of t is 0. Initial conditions. They can be initial displacement, some non-zero value. They can be initial velocity. Initial displacement, you can imagine, you just pull it and release it. This is initial displacement. You just hit it, it is initial velocity. Or you just pull it and then hit it. It will become both initial displacement and initial velocity. But I cannot think of any way where I can apply an initial acceleration directly. Whenever there are non-zero initial conditions, so there can still be some u of t, even if there is f of t equal to 0 or right hand side or p of t is 0. The next step would be harmonic loading, which means a gentle push and a gentle pull. For that kind of p of t, the function describing that loading will be sinusoidal. Sin theta will be like that one. For that p of t also classical solution is possible. You can just treat it as an ordinary differential equation, solve it for sin theta on the right hand side. Okay, sin some function of t, because t is our variable. Periodic loading also classical solution is possible. Impulse loading, a sudden loading which will be having its peak value for a fraction of a second and then again becomes 0. That also can be handled classically. It can be just solved, and you can even come up with an expression of u of t, some trigonometric function, as a solution of that equation for all of these forces and free vibration. But for random force, Duhamel integral can handle arbitrary forces, general forces. Then there are frequency domain methods. As I said, that there is a whole version of structural dynamics which is developed in frequency domain, where the primary variable is not time, it is frequencies. So the loading is described not as a function of time, but as a function of frequencies. And the solution is calculated back not as a function of time, but as a combination of frequencies. So you say that, okay, these much frequencies in these amplitudes are applied, and these much frequencies and these amplitudes are calculated back as a solution. So frequency domain methods can handle anything. They are complex, but they can handle any kind of loading. And then lastly, we have numerical methods. Numerical methods mean that you just don't solve that differential equation in a classical manner. You invoke some assumptions and and calculate the solution in an approximate manner. Maybe some of you have already studied some methods to solve differential equations numerically. Mostly the finite element software uh, follow the numerical methods. There are some famous numerical methods especially devised to solve our differential equation, and those are automated or implemented by these mainstream structural analysis software.